Okay, so let's get into this. Austria is launching its very first military satellite, but it's probably now for the reasons you're thinking. This isn't about spying or communications in the traditional sense. Nope, this mission is all about hunting for these invisible signals that are trying to, well, knock our entire modern world off course. And that's becoming more critical every single day.
All right, imagine this. You're driving, you're trusting your phone's map completely, right? And then all of a sudden, it tells you you're in the middle of a lake, or maybe a field, or even a completely different city. And look, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot. It's a real growing threat. Sometimes it's called jamming, where the signal just gets blasted with noise so it doesn't work. But then there's spoofing, which is way sneakier. It actually sends you a fake signal that actively lies to you about where you are. And trust me, this is way, way bigger than just a civilian problem.
And that's where things get really serious. You see, as Austria's defense minister Claudia Tanner points out, when military forces are relying on that same satellite navigation for everything they do, any kind of disruption could be, well, catastrophic. We're talking about troops getting completely disoriented during a critical mission, whether that's on land, at sea, or in the air. This is a very real, very serious security threat.
So how in the world do you fight an enemy you can't even see? While Austria's answer is to get a better vantage point from way up high. Let's talk about their really cool solution, a satellite they're calling BEACONSAT.
So what's BEACONSAT's job? It's actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly important. It's basically going to fly high above the Earth and act like a space detective. Its whole purpose is to search for and pinpoint the sources of interference that are trying to jam or spoof navigation systems, like the American GPS system or Europe's own Galileo.
What's really fascinating here is who's actually building this thing. This isn't some giant old-school defense contractor. No, the main company, Gate Space, is a startup based in Vienna. And get this, they were only founded in 2022. It's a team effort, of course. They're working with specialists like Space Inventor from Denmark and another Austrian company, Spine, to make all this cutting-edge tech a reality.
All right, a mission this big needs a solid plan and, of course, some serious funding. So let's take a quick look at how this all came together and who's footing the bill.
And the pace here is, well, it's pretty incredible. Think about it. Gate Space gets started in 2022. Just 4 years later, in 2026, all the funding is locked in. And by 2027, BEACONSAT is scheduled to be launching on a SpaceX Falcon 9. For a national space mission, that is a lightning-fast turnaround.
Now the money part tells a really interesting story. We've got the Austrian Ministry of Defense kicking in 1 million euros, and then another $500,000 comes from the European Space Agency, ESA. So right away, you can see this isn't just an Austrian project. It's got a much broader European scope.
Yeah, and that ESA involvement, that's a much bigger deal than just the cash. See, for a long time, ESA has been a strictly civilian agency, period. So for them to help fund a satellite that obviously has military uses, well, that's a huge policy shift. It's a clear signal that they're moving toward supporting what they call dual-use tech, stuff that can serve both civilian and defense needs.
And that brings us to the bigger picture. Because BEACONSAT isn't just about one satellite. It's actually a key piece of a much larger strategy, Europe's push for what they call sovereignty, basically more independence in space.
This quote here from Jan Smolders at Space Inventor just nails it. This is all about proving a point. It's about demonstrating that European companies, including these small, nimble startups, can design, build, and operate advanced defense systems in space all on their own, without having to rely on anyone else.
So when you boil it all down, BEACONSAT is a really powerful symbol. It's a real, tangible example of what's being called a sovereign European space capacity. The whole shebang, the tech, the brains, the money, the control, it's all being developed and kept right here in Europe for Europe's own strategic interests.
But hey, they're not stopping with just one satellite. This is really just the beginning. Austria and its partners are already thinking about what comes next, and the next steps are even more advanced.
Okay, so the follow-up project is called LEO to VLEO. This is a team-up with the Netherlands, and the idea is to build satellites that can actually move between different orbits. They can dip down really low to get a much closer look when something important is happening. The whole goal is to have their own independent, rapid-response satellites that can give them critical images whenever they need them.
So what are these orbits we're talking about? Well, think of low Earth orbit, or LEO, as the standard highway up in space. It's where most stuff is. But very low Earth orbit, or VLEO, is like taking an express lane that's way closer to the ground. Getting into VLEO gives you this incredible advantage for taking pictures and for communication, but there's a catch. Down there, you've got a lot of atmospheric drag trying to pull you down. So a satellite needs its own engine to push back and stay in that orbit without just falling out of the sky.
Okay, so we've gone through the threat, the cool new tech, and the grand strategy behind it all. But what's the big takeaway here? It really all comes down to a fundamental question about security in this crazy, hyper-connected world we live in.
You see, projects like BEACONSAT are a direct answer to just how vulnerable we've become by relying on all these invisible signals from space. But as more and more countries build their own tools to watch over these systems and protect them, it brings up a brand new and really critical question for this new age of space geopolitics. As our world becomes more and more dependent on space, who exactly is watching the watchers?